Finding a job that we love after finishing our PhD is so difficult because basically we spend most of our time in academia. So how are we supposed to know which jobs are right for us? So if you're having the same problems and don't really find a job that you see yourself doing, then watch till the end of this video. Hello everyone, welcome to Career Conversations. My name is Stephanie Ginster and in today's interview we are going to be talking to Kleis Frediksen. Jens is an executive career coach with over 20 years of experience in industry. And finally, after working in a multi-million-dollar company and building some global multinational teams, he decided that this kind of job isn't really for him. And after some thinking and some reflection, he realized what he really wants to do is to be a career coach. So now Jens uses all of his experience back from industry and uses it to help you find a job that you might really enjoy, especially if you don't really have an idea what kind of jobs are out there. For more career advice for your PhD and beyond, subscribe to my channel and also hit the little bell so that you get notified every time I post a new video. And if you're wondering who I am also a PhD student, so I have the same career questions as you. And I ask them to experts and I take their answers and then I turn them into some bite-sized actionable advice so that you can also use their advice to make the most out of your PhD career.
It's a slightly unusual career path that I have had, which has been characterized by, in some respects, planning, but also changing of plans, and very much about learning by doing and getting advice from people along the way. I have a background in business. I'm from Denmark and studied marketing in Denmark and had very early on the benefit of a well-meaning and caring teacher. I wrote my thesis at business school about intercultural management, and I was privileged in that sense to work in a company with a very young team. Some of the most gratifying things was to talk to them about their career development. Again, with the perspective, they didn't know at the time, but I was going through something similar in saying, what motivates me? What makes me happy? What am I good at? The part that didn't work terribly well for me was this, what we call stakeholder management / politics. There are a lot of people who have to be in agreement with what you want to do, although you're the managing director. And it was that part that I really didn't like. And when you think about it, there was nothing wrong with the company. There was nothing wrong with the function, so to speak, from an objective point of view. But from a subjective point of view, there was a big part of my job that I didn't like. And even if I changed the company, that would still be part of my job. So the conclusion was, I'm in the wrong function. So the goal that I have been working towards for 20 years is I reached it. I have learned a lot along the way, and I think that's incredibly important to remember whenever you think about changing things in your career. You didn't waste the time to get there. You acquired a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, you made friendships, you grew, all of it. It's not wasted time. You have to think about the long perspective, and when I'm an old man and I sit and look back, will I feel fulfilled and that I did something meaningful? And right now, and taking a step back, I don't think that would be the case if I continue along this path. So something has to change. Question is now, what? My conclusion was that I wanted to take the skills that I had and move them towards working more with people and leadership development. And that is what I do now. One of my jobs is to work with people who want to implement change in their careers. It can be at an early stage with setting the goals for your career like I did in the beginning of mine, but oftentimes people who are well into their careers and want to change something, or they're being forced to change. They might lose their jobs, might be restructured, the skills that they have might be becoming obsolete, and it's about, so what do I need to acquire so I bring value? And that is where coaching comes in, because coaching in the form that I practice works on the premise that people are whole, resourceful, and creative. So a good coach in my book will never tell you what to do. It's your job, it's your responsibility, it's also your privilege to decide what you want to do. My job as a coach is to help you along the discovery and building the awareness and making your decisions and holding you focused so that you get the results that you want. But you own your situation. And I do that at a headhunting firm here in Lausanne that I have known and worked with for many years, where we have created a new business activity. So whereas we've been doing headhunting and finding senior executives for big companies and organizations for many years, Career Lab that I run is a career strategy practice where people come and get support and advice and structure to their career development.
So then how do you, because you are probably a real good expert at finding out what you want because you went through this drastic career change. So
Yes.
Maybe we could get a bit further into how to find out what it is that you want in your career.
Yes. For me, it starts with what drives you personally. So what gives you value? What gives you energy? And energy, in my mind, work on different levels. So there's the basics, physical, are you in good health? Are you taking good care of yourself? But when it comes to the energy that rewards you, is it into how do you learn? How do you operate? Do you, for instance, prefer to work on your own or with other people? How do you process information? Is it by studying, by observing? Does it give you energy? Look at your hobbies. What kind of hobbies do you have? Some people like gardening, some people like building models, some people, and I'll use myself as an example, I love anything mechanic. I'm crazy about cars, I like watches, anything mechanical that moves fascinates me. So that is one of my drivers, understanding. You should look at what is it? Hobbies. Do you do them alone on teams? Is it fast-paced? Is it slow-paced? That gives you an idea about what energizes you and what not. Think about when you're with people. Some of us, I am one, I'm slightly introvert. So I need time on my own. Being the boss, from you walk in the door until you walk out, and often also afterwards, you are on. People are looking at you, they come to you for advice, with complaints, with all kinds of things. So the downtime, you're certainly not going to get it in the office, particularly not if you want to be accessible, as I believe in. So you look at, what do I enjoy in work? What made me choose my studies? What made you choose your studies?
Well, a big part of it was that I went to career consulting and it was recommended. But I think part of why it was recommended was because I am quite good at logic. My English was also quite good back then, which is quite important as a researcher. Why I chose it? So my father is also, he's not a scientist, he's an engineer, but he always used to raise me and ask, like, how does this work? How do you think it works? So I was kind of, at an early age already, I realized the joy in finding out how things work. Yeah, I guess this is it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we often are inspired by the people around us. My dad is an engineer as well, so I have had the benefit of the inquisitive mind. My mother is a teacher, so so that comes from home. But it can also be people around us. It can be what did we like at school, and that is why when I start working with somebody, regardless of where they are in their career, we start with the assessment, and to make it easier for them, I tell them, go back through your life, whether it's been a long professional life or whether just finishing your studies, and look at the milestones. So it's typically, why did you choose? So let's say for somebody who has been in jobs, I said, go back through your career. What made you do the moves that you did during your career? What do you see as your achievements? Why were they achievements? What did they mean to you? Forget about the company, forget about others. What did it mean to you? And often for people who are in their careers, go back, and I think that therefore also applies to students. What made you choose your studies? What did you like about it? Did you change anything? Did you, like me, suddenly realize, I don't want to be a dentist? And it's part of my trajectory. I then went into business. The first year I did general economics and business, and I hated every second of it because it was too theoretical. And I walked away.
So for me, during my studies, I had a lot of crises, to be honest, because I hated studying. But in retrospect, I think it was quite good that I didn't stop because at the same time I didn't really have a plan B. So I think for me it would have led to a much bigger crisis if I had just said, okay, I will quit now and I will.
And I agree with that. I think that is absolutely true. If you're going through hell, keep going. Don't stop.
Yeah.
Right. It's about taking corrective action, and the way that I see it, look forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's I saw the other day somebody saying, "Don't look back." No, well, you should look back because we learn from our mistakes, and that is how human beings evolve. But don't dwell on them.
Mm-hmm.
If there are decisions you made in your studies, in your career that you regret, well, you can't undo them. That's obvious. But also, they made sense at the time. When you decide something at that moment in time, that decision makes sense. Mm-hmm. Nobody says, "Oh, I'm going to make a really bad career decision right now, and then I'll regret it for the rest of my living days." It does. We don't work like that. So I think it's absolutely keep going, and think about what is it that frustrates you.
Yeah. So in retrospect, I realized it wasn't science. It was the whole thing around universities and studying and having to have exams where I'm never going to apply any of this knowledge anymore. So I felt most of studying was a bit of a waste of time. I realized I have to show that I am capable of understanding those kinds of things. But at the same time, I felt studying most of the time was a waste of time, to be honest. There were a few classes that were just terrible, where I don't understand why.
And I think it's if it gives you any comfort when you study business, that's has very much been my experience as well. I felt oftentimes that there were some things knowledge that I had to acquire that I thought, when am I ever going to use this stuff? And the only reason I'm learning this now is to pass an exam so I can move on with my life and do meaningful stuff. And I also felt sometimes, and that might be a bit controversial, I said I'm being taught by people about how to run businesses, and they have never been in businesses themselves. So which authority? And again, it comes back to my dear former boss Thomas's comment about being on the pitch or observing from the sides, and both things have their advantages. But certainly, my heart is probably more with the merit is the one who actually does rather than looks. But again, as you say, you had an ultimate goal to say, I need to get through this stuff. I feel I'm wasting my time, but I have a goal, and that goal is worth the sacrifice.
Yeah, and at this point, I also felt either you should quit early so that you're not wasting your time, but especially the last year of my bachelor's, before I started my bachelor thesis, was particularly hard. And there I felt I'm not going to quit now and going to lose all of those years. So the problem with studying is if you quit, you have nothing. It is not like quitting a job where you leave with some job experience that you can show for. So
that is true, and I think that is a particular challenge for people who take the academic road. That there comes a point where it's never a point of no return, but let's say it's a point of painful return, because how and where do you reapply what you have acquired during that time so that it is not wasted?
Yeah, no, I definitely see what you mean. And so back to this whole thing of finding out what it is that you want, because in my case, I found out that actually it was the whole university studying system and not science itself that I liked, by coincidence, actually. Because when I finished studying, I said I will never hold a pipette again in my life. And then I went traveling through Australia and Asia, and this was still my belief, or this is really my plan. And then I came back and I had to pay the rent. And then I got a job at a large pharma company. And I just needed it to pay the rent, really, and not because I enjoyed it. So my plan was just to stay like for another 3 or 4 months and find something else. And then I had a super inspiring supervisor, and it was so much fun to work there. But I think it was just pure coincidence that I took this job and not another job. So is there another way that relies less on coincidence, on how to...
Yeah, I think Well, it would probably be a bit bold if I told you that at Career Lab we can increase your luck factor in life. I think luck has something has something in itself, but I also think it's seeking out opportunities, and there you can do something actively, whether it is asking around. And I think one benefit that people in the early stages of their career, or still at uni or business school or whatever vocational education they maybe have, is to seek information from people. And networking has many connotations. Most of them people roll their eyes and say, I'm awful at networking and it's a pain in the backside, which I don't necessarily agree with, but it's a perception we have. But back to early stages of the career, people are very open to talk to you. Because you come with a curiosity. I think everybody empathizes with people in the early stages of their career or in their studies who want to get information about what is it like. We all like that. I certainly do. And I think seek that out and ask people and ask outside your network. Talk to teachers. Like I had a huge gift that a teacher took the initiative and talked to me, because otherwise I wouldn't have asked her back in the day. That put me on a track that certainly had been extremely valuable for me. But seek it out. And if you're curious about something, be it an industry, a particular company, a particular university, find somebody or somebodies who are there or can introduce you to people who are there and say, what's it like? Sometimes I think it's a bloody nightmare. Don't ever think of, but it could. But often you get positive, and it opens the opportunities. And I think being inquisitive about what the options are will always play to your favor. It might be confusing sometimes because you might have a lot of delicious cakes and you can only choose one, at least one at a time. You might eat another cake later, but it's the luxury of choice that can be confusing, whereas it's obviously easier if you have one option, but then you're limited, right? So it's a luxury choice. And I think it's what also helps, in my view, is to be clear about what you don't want. If you know what you don't want, rule it out. Don't waste any time. And the clearer you are about that, often the better. And there's an opposing approach who says, no, if you focus on what you don't want, that is a negative perspective. And I challenge that in the sense that if you know what you don't want, you are not ruling out a lot of other things. An example, again, a metaphor that might help. If you're thirsty and you say, I'm thirsty, I want a Coca-Cola. I want the damn Coca-Cola. You obsess about the Coca-Cola. That's great if you can get it. Nonetheless, you are very narrow in your scope. If you say, I'm thirsty and I don't want a Fanta, that leaves water, tea, coffee, a whole raft of opportunities that you can then explore. So being clear about what you don't want leaves the window of opportunity open to assessing a lot of other stuff and then gathering your intelligence, getting information, listening to your gut now and then as well. I think both in terms of companies, when you talk to people, when you're applying for a job, how do they treat you? What is the experience like? Often it's positive because most people have good intent, but there's also a culture fit. Right? Do I fit in this culture? What do they represent? What do they talk about? What is said about them in the press? But particularly, what do I feel like when I'm with them? And that gives you an indication. But it starts for all of us by dedicating the attention to who am I, what do I want, what motivates me, what is congruent with my values, and accepting as well that your preferences are probably going to change throughout your life, depending on your life circumstances and the experiences that you have when you start a family. There are certain stages in your professional life that where different things will have different weight. It's perfectly normal, but it also means it might be a bit ambitious to believe that you can have a plan from the very early years and that plan is not going to change. And by the way, there is nothing wrong in changing the plan because the world changes around us, and a plan is a guideline. But nobody gets hurt if you change it for the right reasons, right? So it's a guideline. It gives you some structure to work within, and it keeps you focused, but it doesn't keep you obsessed, and it doesn't close out opportunities. And for God's sakes, it's like sailing a boat. If the wind changes, you need to make some adjustments in the way that you have your sail or the course that you're taking. Otherwise, you're never going to get anywhere. So it's not that dissimilar to sailing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I find it really strange that, or not really strange, I'm finding it very understandable, but at the same time, not very helpful that people shame themselves for not sticking to their first plan. And it's almost like a bit arrogant to assume that you know best already at the age of, I don't know where it is, like 25, and you know that you're going to enjoy this for the rest.
Yes, I think arrogant... But there is...
I mean, it is like a bit like a challenging thing to say, arrogant. But I think sometimes it might help people to realize, it is perfectly fine for me to not know what I want.
I think it's the... if you could put it a bit more diplomatically, it's perhaps the deep confidence of the inexperienced. Because it is true, and I think certainly it's also the charm now when one gets a little bit older and there's not a lot of hair left, and we've been around the block a few times, that to see that confidence in young people, but help to harness it and direct it in the right way. Because yes, I was certainly also in the early years of my career, I was a little bit confused, but I also had extremely strong opinions about where I was going and what I was doing, and not necessarily for the right reasons, and certainly not always with the right insights. That comes later. And that is where I think, again, talking to people who have had experiences helps a lot, because with age you acquire wisdom. One of the things that really rise me is sometimes the overestimation of raw brain power. That in itself does not necessarily help you much. Mark Zuckerberg has famously said that young people are just smarter. And I would say that statement proves exactly the opposite. Yeah, he might be very smart, but that's not terribly wise. You need a combination of both, and wisdom comes from experience. So you cannot make up for it. If you're young, you haven't got it, and it's not a pressure cooker. So you need to tap into other people's wisdom. How do you digest what people tell you? Well, it certainly helps if you work on having a pretty clear picture about how you function as a human being. Where are my values? What is it that I like about things? And I keep coming back to that, because self-awareness is a gift. But it's something you have to work on. Some people are more tuned to themselves than others. We all differ on that. But by and large, and I think particularly in a world where we are exposed and have the privilege of having huge amounts of information, we might forget a little bit ourselves, and to say, okay, so where do I fit in all this, and also having the self-awareness gives you a good filter to sort out a lot of the BS. Because certainly in the field of career development, job search in particular, there is an enormous amount of very bad, or at best useless, in some cases downright harmful advice from allegedly experts who don't know what the hell they're talking about. And it is where we all know that we should be critical of our sources. For some reason, when it comes to sort of general topics like career development, we are not maybe as rigorous as we are when we do research or when we run a business. But we should be, and often the self-awareness says, that's bollocks, I'm not buying that one, and you can filter out and make your opinion.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the self-awareness thing, because I totally agree that it is so important. And I think for people, or sometimes when you're new to this, it's quite difficult to understand how to become self-aware. So maybe we could do another tiny exercise.
Yes.
Because you were talking about hobbies, and I think it is so nice how many information there actually are about our future career by just looking at what we do.
Yes.
So, and I think my favorite hobby does say a lot about me, which also leads to podcast, which is doing yoga. How to just see, okay, I have this hobby. This is what it says about me. What is your thought process behind it? Or how do you guide people through a thought process?
It starts by saying, what is it about it that that you like? So I would ask you, what is it about yoga that gives you gratification? What do you take away from it? If you don't do it, how does it feel when you are missing it? And that can be physical, that can be often mental as well. How do you feel emotionally if you're not doing it? And often what happens in your head, or what doesn't happen in your head when you're doing it? So is it the peace of mind, the abstraction from pretty much all external factors, the reflection, the connection between the mental and the physical that you have, which we most of the day we're too busy to have that connection. That gives you an insight in what it is. When it comes to the sports, we spoke about team, individual, fast-paced, slow-paced. When you do something, for instance, I have realized that I like doing mechanical things. I have an old car that I fix little things on, but the complicated stuff I leave to professionals, and now and then I fall prey to fixing things that are not broken, and then they end up at the garage anyway. But when I'm working with my hands and I'm doing something with the car, I guess it's similar to what my parents have with gardening. My dad has a boat that he likes to tinker with. And I think it's you actually have some really good ideas. So I often ask people, okay, when do you have your good ideas? Is it when you're doing yoga, or is it maybe when you're going home from yoga because you had the peace of mind and then something comes to you? Often people say it's when they're doing sports. That also has to do with you have the stress hormones going down and endorphins in your mind when you exercise. So that helps. So that there's almost a universal one. But in which context do you have good ideas? And in which context do you get inspiration that can give you an idea about how you work in which situations, and try to project that into what is this work going to be like?
Okay, so there I have a big question, because I think I get my best ideas while I'm walking. But how do I translate this into then?
Then I would ask you, so what would happen if you were sitting still all the time? And I will ask, what you're doing right now, are you sitting still a lot? And if you are, does there come a point where you need to physically move?
Yes. So actually, this is also what I do, like in everyday work situations. There comes the point where I have to think about something, and then I go out, and we have this beautiful environment here, so I take a walk on the lake. So it looks like I'm being lazy and taking a break, but actually I'm thinking.
No, and it's not lazy at all. I think it's that, and that again is perhaps to think about, let alone profession for a while, but also when you think what kind of work environment. Now there are places where that is accepted and even encouraged, because they are, in my opinion, smart enough to realize that a human being can only concentrate for so long before we need a break. But there is, and this goes back to the early years of my career, we had to wear suits and ties, and people would stay in the office until the boss left. And if the boss had just waited around the corner, he would see the stampede of people leaving as soon as he'd left the building. It was ridiculous, but those were the norms. And obviously, because I'm like you, I need to move to think. So I walk around in meetings quite a lot. I need to get up from my chair. I'm not very good at sitting still for too long at a time. That was an environment that had a lot of other good things, but certainly that was something that I felt. And we were at the time, we were actually also very close to the lake in Zurich, and I was dying to go down to that lake. And I think, for me, it's common sense. You take those breaks, you go back, the energy is there, the focus is there. And again, that comes to my thinking about energy in general. By and large, your concentration starts waning significantly after about an hour. So have you built the breaks in conscious, or if particularly if people are trying to become more productive, are they aware that they need those breaks? And it's not being lazy. It's about restituting your mind and even moving physically to get the blood flowing, and then you sit down and work again. So that it does tell you a lot about, let's say, the work environment, and then also about the profession. And I guess that for you, an upside, since you have a preference for getting out and moving, to thinking is that you are in a work environment where nobody cares whether you are sitting down or standing up, and or whether you're sitting at a desk at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're still there at 10 without having left the room. So I guess that is that. That was one choice you made that seems to have worked out okay.
Yeah, and my job also involves moving because I do experiments.
Yes.
So whenever I feel stuck at the computer, I do an experiment because there are lots of experiments lined up that I have to do.
Yes.
So I don't think I could ever do a job that is just focusing on, only being in front of the computer. It always has to be something else.
And I think it's the better you know yourself, the easier it is to identify that. Experiment, ask people, observe, and also again, I think it's do some reflection, because you can go online, and there are some questionnaires that there are some things that will say, "We'll find your ideal job," and I only came about this over the weekend when I was thinking about what you and I were going to discuss. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give this a try, because I'm a firm believer in working with yourself as an individual, and algorithms and machines can do a lot, but there is also quite a lot of quick fixes out there. I think when it comes to understanding yourself, it's the same thing, by the way, to find a job. There is no quick fix. It takes time, it takes structure, it takes planning, and it takes knowledge about what you want. The clearer you are on those, the better you're going to get, and the sooner you're going to get what you want. Well, nonetheless, I did it. So it took 5-10 minutes. All kinds of questions, obviously, on a range. I prefer structure to being creative. I do this and that. And I answered honestly. Now, the result was I should be a receptionist. I would also be very good at being a credit clerk. I could also work in a customer call center, but not if it was in high conflict or highly confrontational situations, because it turns out that they seem that I am a little bit averse to conflict, which is absolutely true. But nonetheless, it was complete nonsense. I'm 50 years old. I speak 5 languages. I've lived all over, if not the world, Europe, and I have a long career behind me. I don't think the right career choice for me is receptionist, let alone I don't think it was terribly good for the poor company that would have me sitting there. No disrespect to the receptionist, but it's way off the mark. And I think it's if it gets it wrong with me, it will get it wrong with other people. I think it's there. My advice is, technology can do a lot, but you know yourself better than anybody will, and work with yourself.
And do you have a bit of a structure that you guide people through when they have figured out who they are, then how to find a job? I mean, I know a website is probably not recommendable. Not that you're saying
absolutely we do, and because it's the let's say we have our program. Is built from a headhunter's point of view, in the sense that we come across hundreds, thousands of CVs. We talk to hundreds of candidates, and when I say we, it's my colleagues on the headhunting side every year. So we understand what companies that are recruiting are looking for, and we understand what we as headhunters, what kind of information we need to get from candidates. So we come from that, from let's say we know what works. And what works is to be very clear about what you want, what you offer, and those things. There has to be some sort of reality check between what you want and what you offer. What specifically when you're talking job search is how to find the jobs. And there early career jobs, you have a decent visibility because companies posts, you will have careers fairs and things. So getting in touch with companies is a little bit easier. It's not super easy, but still, it becomes hugely challenging the further into your career you get because companies will use firms like us to find the talent. So if somebody is looking for a senior manager or a director, vice president, whatever it is, nobody knows. We know, and we will go out and find them. So what does that mean? That means that you have to be findable so that the headhunters can find you. And you want to be findable for the right stuff. So this is and this is one of the most commonly made errors on LinkedIn. You go on LinkedIn and you do a profile and you just do sort of a short version of your CV. So this is what I've done in the past. And that's great if you want headhunters to contact you for that job. But if you're looking for something slightly different, you have to highlight the qualifications that you have that match the expectations of not the job you're in right now, but the job you want to go to. And that is also why writing your CV, and that is regardless of where you are in your career, starts with being very clear about where do I want that CV to get me. Because somebody is going to look at that CV and they're going to match it, CV, to a job description of your dream job. And if it doesn't match, you're not going to get the interview. So that is why, and this happens a lot. People will come to us and say, I need help on my CV. And I'm not a CV writer, but we have people who are very good at that. But we do know and we can fix up a CV if it's not completely messed up. But nonetheless, the question is, where do you want to go with that CV? And that is where most often people can't put words on that. And I say, how can we write your CV or how can we help you write your CV if you don't know where it's going to take you? So it's the CV comes quite late in the process because you need to be clear about what do I bring, where do I want to go, is that a realistic ambition to have considering what I offer the job market? Then you write the CV. Otherwise, you're putting the cart in front of the horse in front of the cart. Because you're creating a document without being clear where's that document going to get me. So let's say, this might sound a little bit high-flying, but your CV is a forward projection of where you want your skills and experience to take you. So if you don't know where you're going, it's really, really hard to find, right? So so that's to this. So that is the part of the process, but it starts with you need to know what you want. You need to know what you bring, and then gathering intelligence. If you don't know stuff, and this is where it's a lot easier in the early parts of your career. And there's some some best practices about network that we learn is and not everybody practices, which is networking is just a fancy word for relationships. And relationships are built on trust, and they're built on a mutual interest and benefit. But the trust is really important. And often you want your network either to introduce you to people or give you information, or maybe even have you in the back of your mind and say, hey, I heard somebody's talking to somebody and say, we're hiring somebody and we could really do with somebody with an academic background. And that person will say, I know that Stephanie might be thinking about, opportunities and whatnot. You want people to have you in the back of your mind. Now,
quick question before we get into networking, because I still have a question about LinkedIn.
Okay. LinkedIn. Absolutely.
Because there are lots of people, especially when they are doing a PhD, who are looking for a job while they're still in another position. And especially if you're wanting to do a job that looks a little bit different than what you want to do, then I think the LinkedIn algorithm updates people when you and says like, congratulates Stephanie for her new position on XYZ.
You can turn the alerts off. So in your privacy settings, when you update your profile or change something, that you can turn that off.
So your boss won't be notified that
no.
you're updating your LinkedIn
No.
because this
No,
is kind
exactly.
of telling your boss, I'm looking for another job, and this kind of.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. There are ways that you can deactivate some of the alerts or all of the alerts so that people are not actively now. Obviously, if your boss spends his or her time perusing the LinkedIn profiles of the employees on an active basis, they will see it, but you can turn off the alerts. So that is true. You can also think, do they care? Sometimes it might be if somebody becomes aware and say, I see that Stephanie is updating her profile and I'm your boss, and I say, I wonder whether she's happy with her job because I actually don't want to lose her. And perhaps it's time for me to, as a boss, to have a chat with you about, is there anything that could be better for you here? Because whatever. It's still a little bit on the slightly invasive part because your LinkedIn profile is a public profile, but it is also a social media sphere. So there are limits to how much an employer should be looking at it. But they do. And it could be perhaps a little flag to make somebody else in the organization aware that she's actually an asset. Maybe we want to make sure that she's happy where she is. But long answer to a short question, there are ways that you can turn off those alerts.
Okay, that is good to know. But I actually interrupted you about the networking thing because I think this is one of the most important things.
It is. And I think networking is, as I said, it's about building trust, and it takes time. There are some advantages of being in the early stages of your career. I think people are more open. It's also to approach networking in a non-transactional way. If you need something, don't be too blunt. Respect people's time. Respect that people might want to get to know you a little bit before you ask them to do stuff. And understand, just like you do when you prepare the content for the podcast, understand your audience. And this is something that perhaps we are unfortunate and fortunate in the headhunting industry, that people come to us when they want career advice. We have created Career Lab because of this. So maybe a bit of background. The firm has existed for many, many years. We have done career strategy training specifically for MBA graduates for more than 10 years. But the reason, let's say the raison d'être, why we now have created Career Lab is because we have been contacted, and still are, by dozens of people on a weekly basis looking for career advice or typically looking for a job. And some of them even have the audacity to send an email and say, my CV is attached, I'm looking for opportunities, kindly agree to a time where I can come and have a coffee and talk about companies that you can introduce me to. Now, that is not at all what a headhunter does. And the only thing that people are doing by this is burning bridges. And so do your homework. Understand what a headhunter does. Understand that a headhunter, we would love to talk to everybody that contact us, but that is not what our clients are paying us to do. So if we did that, we would go out of business and we were doing a disservice to our clients. Now, what you want to do, if you want to be on the radar screen of a search firm or a headhunter, is to find the ones that you are relevant for. So if you are, an example, if you are in marketing for consumer goods, find the headhunting firms and the people within the headhunting firms that operate in that field, and send them a kind message through LinkedIn or an email, or if somebody can introduce you to them and say, I'm interested in opportunities, this is what I offer. If anything comes up, I'll be happy to hear from you. And here comes the giving back part. In the meantime, if I can be of help to any of your searches, I'll be delighted to give you a hand. That is a nice, constructive, but without being presumptuous and thinking just because I send you an email, you're going to have a coffee with me that you will be paying for and dedicate an hour. It sounds really harsh, but it's a numbers game. There are millions of candidates right now looking for jobs. The headhunters cannot talk to all of them. It's the job seeker's job to be relevant and to be findable. And by the way, also, and that comes back to the career strategy, even if you are in a job, if you might be considering things to move, do whatever you want, but to move forward, be clear about what you're interested in. Have an idea. So when the headhunter calls, you can articulate, this is what I bring, this is what's interesting for me, and know what you don't want. Because then again, then we have a mutual exchange. We can help each other. We're always happy. Most of us ended up in this profession because we actually like people. And we like to see people develop and find solutions with them. And that is one thing to LinkedIn. I think our profession as headhunters is getting a lot of undeserved criticism. Yes, there are some bad experiences out there. And yes, it is by definition a stressful experience to look for a job. It is a stressful experience to interview for a job. But by and large, the let's say the serious firms in the industry, and we are many of them, treat people with respect and look for a positive outcome. We also have to remember, perhaps just to close that one off, that for any given job, there are several candidates. Only one can get it. Now, that also means that if you don't get the job, it's not a reflection of anything being wrong with you. And oftentimes, when you don't get the job, think about, and any good headhunter or company for that matter, should be open to giving you some feedback as to why. And if they say that it's the culture fit, that's probably a really good thing, in the sense that I would much rather not get the job and realize after a year or 6 months that this is not the place for me. So again, it's not a bad reflection on you. It's not a criticism, but and it happens, by the way, as well, when you go to interviews or when you talk to companies about potential opportunities. It's also for you to decide. This is about it's matchmaking. Are we going to have a joyful experience together that both parties will enjoy? There's absolutely nothing wrong in you as a candidate saying when you walk away, you know what, that didn't feel right. And you digest it a little bit because it might be that it's just a hunch, but the hunch might tell you something. And if you walk away, that's fine.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because especially in the PhD field, when you want to do a PhD, applications or job interviews go really, really quickly sometimes. And I don't think it is a good thing. Some people think it is a sign that they are super qualified if they have been hired after 15 minutes. But I think it's a sign that your supervisor doesn't really care about who you are.
It could be. And it begs the question, and that is why search firms like ours, we have a lot of experience. Our researchers are the people who work on the searches, know a lot about interviewing, because let's be honest, most of us, that's not our core competence. And if you have a 15-minute chat with somebody, if you are not a professionally trained interviewer, somebody with a lot of experience, what are you actually getting out of that conversation? Or is it just to sense the chemistry? And maybe that's all it needs to say, you know what, I like this person. I can see myself spending many hours, and you always take a risk, right? As a boss with whom I've worked on several occasions, and made some very, very wise words to me some years ago, where he said, I worked really, really hard to get where I am. And that also means that when I hire somebody, I'm risking all that, because if we screw this up, it's also my investment, it's my paycheck, it's my family, it's all this. So he said, for that reason, it's very important that the people I hire, I see success with them in terms of their hard skills, their soft skills, because I'm taking a risk by hiring you. And that is very true. But to your point, 15 minutes depends a lot on the circumstances. But obviously, sometimes it's a coup de foudre, and people meet and they say, "Go professionally and personally, we're a great match, and this will be a journey towards the horizon and a beautiful sunset." Who knows? But I share a bit of your reservation with that.
Yeah. Okay, that is good that you have, that you share a bit of the reservation.
Absolutely. I think there's a balance to be had. On the other hand, and that you see a lot in business, that you have to go through interview after interview after interview, in which case, depending on who's involved, yes, you have a lot of stakeholders and all the rest of it, but sometimes you as a candidate might ask, are these guys good at making decisions? Because it seems to be that they keep wanting more and more and more before making up your mind. Because especially if you're working with professionals in the recruitment part and in the search part, it ain't rocket science to figure out who can do the job and whether the culture fit is there or not. And there are a few stakeholders that have to be involved. But if you get to the sixth or the eighth interview, then probably there's something about the decision-making process that's difficult, or they're hesitant about whether they have the right people in front of them, which tells you something as well as a candidate. And say, all right, how far am I going to take this before I say, look, you got to talk to somebody else?
Oh, this is interesting for everyone who does a PhD. So how many interviews are common for a job?
That depends a lot on circumstances, a lot. So I wouldn't say a general rule, but if you were, and I think if you're still doing your PhD, it might be unlikely that you are being contacted by a headhunter. So let's take the headhunter first. So you're in a job or you're doing something, headhunter calls and says, I might have an interesting opportunity for you. They are typically 1-2 interviews, which is part of the selection process. So we will identify a given number of people that are relevant for the job that we are trying to fill. Then we have a first contact with them. Are you interested? Some people say, no, I'm actually really happy where I am. I don't want to waste anybody's time. Thanks very much. All the best of luck. Off you go. Some people say, yes, I would like to understand a bit more. Then we have a first conversation with them. They're not an interview yet. And it might be that there's 1 or 2 more conversations before we narrow down the talent mass to a short list that we will then present to our client, the company. And then they will say, okay, we want to see Jens, we want to see Stephanie, we want to see Bob. And then it goes, and then on the client side, there can be typically 2, 3. Sometimes you have more, it depends a little bit. Now, back to you, when you're doing a PhD, I would expect a couple, 3, normal, 4, perhaps not unusual. Some organizations, and also in academia, also apart from meeting line management and HR, also want to meet the team. I think rather interesting for both parties, because then you get more faces to the culture, and you get a sense of that. It also gives you an idea of the, let's say, how consensus driven is the organization versus is it top down, and once the boss has made up his or her mind, that's what everybody does. But by and large, I would say 3 is not unusual. For 1 is probably an exception, for instance, right? If you have...
Well, this is in academia.
Okay,
so usually in academia it is, well, it depends what kind of boss you have. But I know one person who had a 10-minute Skype interview and got the job. So
that's pretty well done. Let's see how that works afterwards. But if on the other hand, and I think that's where perhaps academia can be a little bit easier in a way, is if there's some specific academic qualifications or specific research work that the person must have, then probably the talent pool is extremely small. And then it is, do you have those? Yes. Now, do we see potential in working together from a quality point of view? Yes. All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's those 2 things. It is quality and education, but not necessarily personal level, because I don't think you can determine a personal level after 10 minutes.
No, often not. First impressions have a lot to say, but I think you shouldn't. But absolutely, it depends a lot on the selection criteria, and we in business largely you will have a wider scope of people, because you can be have a finance background or an HR background or marketing background from other industries that might be interesting to look at, because they bring same skill sets but slightly different perspectives and whatnot. So there the scope is bigger, hence more people going through the selection process. We might have what you call wildcards. So whereas a client will say, I want somebody who comes from the pharma industry and he or she has to have a director level in finance with X amount years of experience and US GAAP compliant accounting practices. And then we can come with a wild card and say, but this one actually, she comes from a slightly different industry, but has a more rounded experience in the finance field. So it might be a little bit of a curveball to the client, but we see potential in adding some knowledge and some experience to their organization that might actually be valuable to them. So that is where the judgment of the headhunter comes in and says, we think this could be a good match. Think about it. And they might say yes, they might say no, they might say let's talk to her and see what comes out of it. But that is where the judgment of the recruiter comes. Hence also the importance of being clear and building a good relationship with those guys. Don't piss them off by inviting yourself to a coffee with them, for instance. It's hardly not gonna get you where you want to go.
That is very good advice. So to sum this up, maybe could you say just in 2 sentences again, what is your number one advice on how to figure out what it is that you want to do? And then later, what is your number one advice on how then to find a job?
Yes.
It can also be 3 sentences.
Okay, no, but one sentence, know yourself and know what drives you, what energizes you, what gratifies you, to identify where you want to take your skills. It starts with yourself. And a little side note, be careful with listening too much about what other people say and what other people think. It's about you. Some advice is useful, not all. So trust your own self-knowledge. That's about identifying where you want to go. How you're going to find it, gather intelligence, get information, and work against a plan. Have a plan. Most of us do it in a more scattered. My career decisions have certainly been a mix of a bit of dumb luck, and I think that we all benefit from that. Very good advice from people at the right moment, and some of it unsolicited, and I still thank them for it today, but not an awful lot of planning, and have a bit of structure. And I think it's also, in today we have the benefit of having vast amounts of information available and a huge number of people you can reach out to, where was when I started my career 20-something years ago, that didn't exist. We have that, but it also means it's easy to get confused. So gather information in a structured way and vet that against your plan and your preferences to see whether that's going to giving you an intelligence that can help you make a decision.
Those were some very good advice. Thanks a lot.
That was my pleasure. Interesting conversation. It's an interesting
definitely.
topic. We all tend to care quite a lot about our careers, right? Because it's a big part of our lives.
Yes, we spend so much time at our jobs.
We do.
That we should love it.
That is why it should be worthwhile.
Yes, definitely. Wasn't this a nice interview? Jens also told me later that the reason why he is so passionate about careers is that he can help people make the most out of their talents and experiences to improve their entire life. And like I said, he can really relate to everyone because his own journey is also a journey of constant learning, self-reflection, and so on. So I really enjoyed the interview because I really felt he could help everyone else, because he can really relate to people who are looking for a job that they will really enjoy. My favorite takeaway was that it is actually super easy to reflect on what it is that we are good at by just looking at our hobbies, looking at what we are doing at work already. Everything is there. We just have to have a close look and start to reflect a little bit more. So what was your favorite takeaway in the interview? Please let me know in the comments below and maybe we can start a discussion. Also, for more tips and tricks, follow Career Conversations either on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Instagram. And there we give some behind the scenes footage, we give some Tip Tuesdays and all kinds of things. So make sure that you are also subscribing there. And if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like. And also make sure to share it with your friends and your colleagues if it was helpful for you, because then it might also be helpful for them. And if you liked it, again, comment down below and tell me what you liked so that I can make more content like this. And I wish you a great day and I hope you will get ahead in your PhD career. Bye.